a rational man, tethered to the pragmatic realities of life. My daily routine was as mundane as they come, filled with deadlines and endless meetings in the city of suburban monotony. Yet this sharp focus on the ordinary began to fray, the seams torn apart by a sudden, creeping awareness that stuffy evenings were being watched. It started innocently enough in my peaceful two-story home. I had relocated to this neighborhood with my wife, Claire, who cherished its quaintness. She would often joke, "The city is too loud for me here, it's just right," whispers of people living their lives. I thought she was right, at least until I noticed a flicker of movement outside our bedroom window. Nights became restless. I am not the superstitious type, but the light from our street lamp cast unusual shadows in the wash of darkness, and the sound of cicadas felt ominous, as if nature itself were trying to warn me. Every time I came home from work, the uneasy feeling would settle deep in my gut. It was a damp evening when I first caught sight of him, a figure standing motionless at the edge of the property line. The man was dressed in a dark hoodie, his face obscured by shadows. I stared for longer than I should have, but just as quick as the chill crept over me, he melted away behind the dense thicket of trees lining the back of our yard. I brushed it off as a figment of my imagination, conjured by an overactive mind. "It's just the stress, that's all," I told myself. "It's nothing." I made sure to lock the doors tight that night, an instinct driven by a primal urge I usually kept at bay. But after that night, I started to see him more frequently. At first, it was just an unsettling shadow lurking outside our home. Those darkened nights morphed into taunting stalking. He would appear while I watched television, his shape barely perceptible behind the woodpile or beneath the overgrown bushes, only to vanish when I glanced outside. Claire noticed my agitation, the way my fingers would stroke the fabric of the couch, my eyes darting toward the windows. "James, you're starting to worry me," she said one evening with an eloquent touch of concern. "You've been on edge. Has something happened at work?" It took everything in me to avoid mentioning my invisible assailant. Being the rational man I prided myself on being, I could not bear to sound ludicrous. "Just tired, love. I've got a lot on my plate," I replied, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. But the feeling of being watched grew more oppressive, more inescapable. Every night I would watch for him, propelling myself into a false sense of control, waiting for him to show up again. I even considered installing lights along the edges of my yard, but fear gripped my throat. What if I confronted him? What if he came out from the shadows, confident and vindictive? The dread heightened, springing life into gruesome thoughts. I envisioned having to defend our home, what I would do with an intruder. I even imagined Claire's terrified face as I fought to protect her from harm. The idea was ludicrous, paralyzing yet intoxicating, and I found it impossible to shake. As days slipped by, the presence of the peeping Tom grew more audacious. One night, I saw him through the window, standing by a tree, still as a statue, an eye like a predator locking in on its prey. Then, just as abruptly as he'd been there, he was gone. Horrified, I leaped to the phone and dialed the police. After what felt like an eternity, the officer arrived, a weary smile on his face as he surveyed my anxious demeanor. "Sir, unless you can provide a solid description, there's not much we can do," he soothed. "Try to take precautions, lock up tight, we'll patrol the area." But the hollow words of comfort did little to ease my nerves. I went back inside, the house now feeling more like a prison than a sanctuary. On the 10th night of unease, it shifted. Claire had agreed to spend a weekend at her sister's place, so I was alone. I could hardly concentrate on the tasks at hand, my mind swirling with the image of that dark figure lurking, watching. As night descended, I leaned against the wall in the living room with only a flickering candle lighting the space. A loud thump resonated from the upstairs, breaking the stillness. My heart raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I tiptoed toward the large staircase. I reached the top reluctantly, scanning the dimly lit hallway that stretched before me like a chasm. The shadows crowded, narrowing my vision. "Claire?" I whispered, but all I could hear was silence. Just as I was about to retreat, I caught a glimpse of movement in the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, shifting back and forth, as if to beckon me forward. Forcing a deep breath into my lungs, I pushed it open. The room was dark, save for the faint glow from the moon illuminating the sheets where Claire typically slept. My gaze was drawn to the window, and there he was, standing, watching, his silhouette stark against the beams of silver light. "Who are you?" My voice barely broke above a whisper, choking me as I felt the icy fingers of fear. But he didn't respond. He simply stood there, eyes glinting like two jagged shards of glass. I flipped on the light switch, illuminating him in a harsh glare. He looked old, filthy, with wild hair and an unsettling smile creeping onto his lips. But there was no hint of fear on his face, only satisfaction. The moment crackled with tension, and then, as if reality itself had turned to liquid, he vanished, melting into the shadows of the corner as swiftly as he had appeared. I stumbled backward, dread wrapping around me like a vice. This was no longer a matter of rationality. This was a nightmare clawing at my sanity. I called the police again, my voice trembling into the phone. They assured me help was on its way, but in each passing moment, I felt the walls closing in the air turning stale, heavy with unspoken terror. Not knowing what to do, I retreated to the living room and barricaded the door with the couch, my heart thrumming like a caged bird. The weight of the night felt endless, unnerving laughter echoing in my mind. I dropped into a restless sleep, my dreams haunted by his eyes, those twisted, penetrating eyes. The sound of bursting glass awaited me when I awoke. Somehow he had broken in. Panicking, I sprang to my feet and grabbed a daredevil's desperation. Armed with nothing but a lamp, I navigated the darkened corridors of my home, preparing for a confrontation, dreading its outcome. But there was no sign of him. The air in the living room shifted, an unnatural chill billowed through, and I froze. As I turned again to the shattered window, I saw him, a faint outline, lingering outside, closer now, standing boldly among the shards of night. His smile spread across his face, twisted and wide, and just before my world drowned in darkness, I heard a low, raspy whisper echo through the night, "You can't hide from me, James." That damned whisper still haunts my every waking moment, a chilling reminder of the man who watched, the peeping Tom who thrived on fear, and eventually my own sanity crumbled into dust under his baleful gaze. Even now, nights empty of sleep carry his twisted presence, lurking in the shadows of my mind.